And hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Kent Holste on YouTube, but now officially on the website that is now out, open and ready to go. It's KentHolstePodcast.com. So check it out and join in the conversation there. But here we are right now with our show with another interview, and I gotta tell you, it's one of the things where I felt it was important to talk to this guy. And for one of the reasons is I can relate to him sort of because I was bullied growing up. In high school, it was really difficult for me because I just was in that little small bunch where people were mean. People wanted to say things that hurt, and it's not cool. But not only that, with Eli here, he had a medical condition that kind of affected his life. So not only was it emotional damage in his life, but also health damage that happened. And his story is inspirational. So for those of you that are watching that are looking for a message from this podcast today, you're going to definitely find something. And I just want to introduce my buddy from the East Coast in Maine, Eli Taylor. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So,
Great.
like I said in my introduction here, your life has had a lot of roller coaster moments, I would say. Let's get into the most important thing about it, and that's the topic of bullying. From the sounds of it, your life wasn't that easy growing up, was it?
It had its moments. I definitely faced some hardships, but I don't think probably not to the same extremities as other people. Maybe I did, but not the way that I saw it. Growing up as a kid, I always had a very imaginative, like a very vivid imagination and very creative mind. And I grew up mildly learning disabled. What came to be in my late teens, early 20s was a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, which used to be classified as Asperger's disorder, it's high functioning autism. So that played into it as well. Always kind of off in my own world and my own imagination. I was definitely a daydreamer, and I had a speech impediment. I used to stutter a lot. So that definitely played into it. I was never really the common straight man as far as what people saw as mainstream, which is kind of ironic because I'm a little bit more mainstream now than I used to be then. But just my eccentricities and the oddities about my personality, just for being the creative, artsy type, and also kind of being this ambiguous element of like my sexual orientation. Like I grew up identifying myself as bisexual, and people would automatically write me off as being gay and things like that. I kind of had more of an effeminate nature coming from a family that was full of women, so I had a bit of a hard time fitting in to the crowd of my peers, and I definitely got some flack for that. So that's where that element came in. I was never really severely beaten or pushed around. I got pushed around a little bit, got into some fights here and there, but it wasn't where anything was like really threatening my life. So I was lucky in that aspect.
Okay. Well, it's anything bullying to me is a serious situation because it 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 may not hit you right away, but it affects you. And the words that people say definitely cut deep sometimes. And for me growing up, that's how it was with people saying stuff about my character, kind of like you're in your situation. But that happened, believe it or not, when I was in first grade all the way to my senior year in high school. And it was very difficult. You know, I would seclude myself in my parents' basement, and I didn't want to go anywhere because I was just not wanting to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with people saying stuff. I just wanted to be alone sometimes. And I didn't talk about what people were doing to me, to my parents, as much as I should have, which moved a lot of anger issues, depression issues that I was suffering from. So, go into more like what did you do to kind of motivate yourself during those times to get through those moments?
I fell back on my creative outlet, the artistic side of my personality. When I was 9 years old, that's when I discovered my talents for writing and my love of filmmaking. I had seen the movies Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and that really propelled me into starting um, my creative writing, my screenplay writing, and what really led to not just a hobby, but kind of now turning into um, a business situation or a business opportunity of building out my own production company, Star Universe Productions. And I wrote a screenplay that was based off of those two movies that I had seen, and it was called Fright Fest, and it kind of propelled into this trilogy of screenplays that I would just throw myself into and really let that creativity out and channel that energy into it. And it really came out to be a beautiful thing. I got the neighborhood kids involved as the other cast members, and we would perform skits and really act out the screenplays. And that kind of really led me into doing more projects like that throughout my life. And really honing in on my talents and seeing what I could do creatively was very therapeutic for me.
Yeah, it's always nice when you have something to fall back on. Like for me, it was just listening to music or, you know, just watching a favorite TV show. It's always I think the issue with a lot of people is when they get bullied and they don't know how to cope with it. And instead of doing positive things to kind of ease their mind or to deal with that frustrations, you know, there's a lot of people who choose the wrong route and get into the wrong crowd, get into drugs, get into alcohol, or just make the ultimate bad choice of just ending their life. And that's not the way to go. So my question for you is, knowing everything that you've gone through in your life and seeing other people's stories throughout your life of being bullied and ridiculed essentially, what would be your suggestion to those that are going through the same thing you did so they know that they're not alone and be successful in growing from their situation?
I would say always know your self worth. It's always important to look at the positive qualities that you have about yourself. And even if you're not able to see them yourself, look around to those who you do have supporting you on your side, whether it be your family or any close friends that you have. Talk to them about what they like most about you and what they admire most about you. And it's really about building up that self esteem and not just getting affirmation from others, but kind of creating affirmation for yourself and what you like most about yourself. For me, knowing that I had such a creative visual mind that was very imaginative, I knew that I could go into these worlds that I could create. And it would really take me in any direction. Just flowing with that energy kind of built up a confidence and built up my own very spotlight to be in, and kind of rather than shying away from that spotlight and being embarrassed by it, and being embarrassed by whatever flaws I had, I knew where my talents were and I knew where they had laid. So it's really about knowing for yourself what about yourself that you like, and just taking it and running with it, because that's going to take you further in life, and that's going to ultimately what will make you really successful in life if you hone in on your skills.
Now, I know a lot of the things that people say can be very hurtful, like I said. To those people watching that are the problem, not the solution, what can you tell them about what they're doing to people, and in a positive way, that is, let them know how this affects people like it did to you? What would you tell them that they could do different?
That's a very interesting question, because I find myself as someone who these days doesn't really get offended easily by what people say, but I know that there's a lot of people who almost kind of make a point of like being offended for the sake of being offended, and whether they had faced it as a trauma response, and they hold a lot of stock in the fact that the words that we say hold a lot of power. And I definitely agree that there's some truth to that. Um, and I know that it's always important to be mindful of what you're saying or what you're doing, because actions definitely speak louder than words. But I think what it boils down to is choices in life, and we always have the choice to either do better or to do worse. And um, I'm not sure if it's just the difference between trying to think with your right brain and not with your left brain, or whatever, where it's intellect versus emotion. And personally for me, I think letting our emotions guide us and being the sole proprietor of our decision making in life gets a little bit messy. But for those who are watching or listening and they're kind of more the antagonist of the situation rather than being part of the solution, I would say that your behavior is bullshit, and there's always a chance to do better. There's always a bigger picture to look at. So if you're going to be petty and if you're going to hurt others just for the sake of hurting others, just because you get off on it, then that says that there's more wrong about you than there is about the person that you're picking on.
Absolutely, I agree. It's for me. I can't deny the fact that I've been a bully sometimes in my life. I think we all do, and sometimes we notice it, and sometimes we just don't even think about it because it's a natural thing of being a human being. That is our biggest flaw, is that we tend to say and do things without even thinking about it. And that's the unfortunate thing. But the biggest thing that I admire about you and the time working with you is that I noticed that about you. You always had a positive outlook. I don't think I ever saw you angry. I don't think I ever saw you upset. You always had a smile on your face, and you were always happy and willing to do anything to help somebody around in that store. And that's what I admire the most about you, and that's what's cool. Now, moving on to the next part of your life, not only did you have the form of Asperger's that you talked about, uh, but you also had cancer, if I'm correct. Talk about that. What happened to you there?
Okay, so beginning probably be about a month before I had turned 23, I started having severe migraines. And the first time that it had happened, I never experienced anything like that. I thought it was a total fluke. I also growing up with the health issues, not just having to face cancer and whatnot, which actually came later in life in my 20s and whatnot. And I was born with a form of kidney disease, which was genetic from my birth mother's side. And I'll get more into that in a few minutes about the whole, birth parent thing. But I had grown up having a form of kidney disease, and my doctors always had known that eventually I would need a kidney transplant in my life, which I did end up having at the age of 23. It happened a little bit sooner than what my doctors had expected. They had always figured that I wouldn't need one until I was in my 30s, but here I am, 32 years old and 9 years out, and I'm still doing well. But at the time, about a month before I turned 23, it was just a few months after I had started my dialysis treatment while I was waiting for a transplant. And I had come home from dialysis treatment one day. I had a cup of coffee, and then I got a headache afterwards. I was like, okay, well, this is just minor. It's caffeine headache. It'll go away. But then progressively, as the afternoon and the evening went on, it got worse and worse. And the headache was so severe that I ended up not being able to move from my bed because I was sick to my stomach. I was in such agony, and I had to lay there in a dark room, debilitated, not being able to do anything because my head hurt so bad. And I ended up having migraines quite frequently after that. It was like 2 to 3 times a week of just like these killer, I'm not sure if I would even call them headaches because it was not a regular headache. It was like, for those of you who out there who have migraines, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like someone is taking a hammer to your frontal lobe and smashing it in. And it's the worst pain that you could ever imagine. I wouldn't even wish that type of worst enemy. So I dealt with that for quite some time, and I tried to figure out how to stop it. Everything from taking Excedrin to eventually taking Imitrex and whatnot. But eventually, what had happened in September of 2015, 5 years ago, I woke up one morning with a lump on my head. I'm like, okay, well, what the hell is this? And it wasn't really all that surprising after all the suffering I had gone through with the migraines. So I had my doctors check it out. I was like, okay, I've got this lump in my forehead. I'm not quite sure what it is. I have an inkling of what it could be. So in November of that year, I went for an MRI just to rule out that it wasn't a brain tumor, kind of put my paranoia to rest. And the results from that came back clear. It wasn't a brain tumor because it was too much on the surface. It wasn't really touching brain tissue or what I could see from or feel from that point. So eventually in June of 2016, after finding out that it wasn't a brain tumor, but I was like, all right, well, maybe it's a cyst that I can have removed. So in June of 2016, I went for a consultation in Biddeford at a dermatologist's office. And I saw Dr. Frankel, and she set me up for a biopsy in July of 4 years ago. And it was about a month and a half after I had the consultation. I had the surface tissue taken off. I still had the root tissue intact, but they sent the surface tissue to a dermatologist and a skin tissue specialist and everything. And in August of that year, probably about 6 weeks later after the biopsy that I got the results, and they were like, okay, well, here's the thing. It is a tumor. It's a very rare type of tumor. It happens 1 in every million cases. And, lo and behold, I was the one that got it.
Wow.
But they said it's such a rare type of tumor that it can start out benign, but turn quickly malignant if you're not careful with it. But it's good that we caught this in time. So Dr. Frankel has set me up for a couple surgeries. I went to a surgeon in Portland at Plastic and Hand Associates, and the first surgery that I had was October 17th of 2016, and that was when they had really found out that it was cancerous. They had gone in to take the root tissue out, and they had found that the cancer had metastasized and spread into the skeletal muscle of my right eyelid. Now, what was going on was because of the migraines, the tumor was basically pushing its way towards the surface and became embedded into my cranium. And when it had turned cancerous, it had spread into the skeletal muscle of my right eyelid and was just barely touching brain tissue. It was more of a bone cancer than a brain cancer, but the surgeons, after the first surgery, after we had found out that it was cancerous, I got sent up to Scarborough a week later for another surgery. And that was the second surgery of the bunch. And Dr. Khan was an eyelid surgeon who removed the rest of the cancer and went through a huge chunk of my forehead had gotten taken out. They went through skin tissue and muscle tissue all the way down to the bone, and they had to do a skin graft to fill that all in. And they got it all out in the two surgeries. I've been in remission ever since. Chemotherapy wouldn't have done anything for it. I never wanted to do that anyway. I sought out the homeopathic holistic aspect of it. I ended up doing aromatherapy and just mixing a few different types of essential oils that were really good for brain health and use that as my treatment. There were a couple of radiation treatments available, but I didn't want to do that because I had seen what had happened to my Grams when she was diagnosed with bladder cancer in 2004, and she died in 2008 at the age of 80, and the chemotherapy and the radiation just made her really sick and had killed her off. So I didn't want to put my life at risk like that. So I was like, no, I want no part in it. I want to do the holistic thing, homeopathic thing. That's the treatment that I'm going to seek out. And I even quickly looked into acupuncture, but it just ended up being something that I really couldn't afford at the time. So that was the type of cancer that I had. And I don't really get migraines anymore unless it's, tension headaches that I let fester every now and then just from, poor posture issues and muscle tension that I carry often in my neck and my shoulders. But I usually try to catch it in time before it becomes anything worse. But the cancer ordeal was definitely put at bay from the surgeries and the aromatherapy.
So, what was it like emotionally for you going through all this? It had to be not very easy to handle that. You obviously had to feel some sort of, the whys. Why am I going through this? Why did it have to be me? What were your thoughts during that time?
It was exactly very much like that. It was not a pleasant experience. Like every time I would come down with a migraine, just having it be so debilitating that having to lay in a dark room in my bed 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes being sent home early from work, sometimes it would strike when I wasn't working, and just kind of ruining whatever plans I had for the day and kind of really getting in the way of like living my life to its fullest. And there were definitely times where I would lay in bed just writhing and screaming in pain and just like wishing it was all over. And sometimes it would get to the point where I was so sick to my stomach, and that's when I knew that it was full blown. Other times it was just annoying but painful, and it wasn't excruciating, but it was still agonizing to a certain extent. So by the time that I had received the diagnosis, I was in recovery from the first surgery. And when the doctor had come in and said that it had in fact turned cancerous, I was still coming out of the anesthesia. I was kind of still out of it. But from what my brain could process from the information I was telling me, I was in shock. I was definitely upset and emotional. And I just sat there. I remember being in the hospital bed, and I'm like, I am far too young for this shit. Not that cancer at any age is not a pleasant thing to go through, and I definitely feel for people out there that are going through cancer, whatever type they might have. But we're all warriors in a sense when we're fighting that battle. So I'm glad to have gotten my life back from what I missed out on, and being in a much healthier spot these days. But I definitely felt screwed over by the hands of fate when I was going through that experience.
So what motivated you to stay positive during that time?
Um, I I knew that I just had to put stock in something. So putting my faith in the doctors and the surgeries, and knowing whatever natural medicine was out there that modern science and modern medicine just really couldn't cover. Um, I knew that I had to put my faith in that, because when all else fails, you have to rely on nature and what grows from the earth. And I had that to fall back on. But, facing everything with a positive, optimistic attitude is really what gets you through, because everything all boils down to energy. It all boils down to our thought processes. It boils down to how we think of things, how we approach things. And if we're putting the energy out there, it's kind of like karma. It's everything you put out there comes back to you so many times over. So being pessimistic all the time and being negative all the time, that drains you of all your energy, and it's really a waste of time. That's not the type of person that I am. I know that there's been times where I've been conceived as negative, but to me, it's just been more realistic. Um, Facing adversity with positivity is what is going to get you through, because you're putting that optimistic energy out there, and it'll come back to you tenfold, or however many times you believe it'll come back onto you. So that's what's really going to turn your life around, because if you just you can't um, you can't go through life expecting positivity when all you're doing is surrounding yourself with the negativity. And I know that there's a mantra out there that is kind of similar to that, but it's really, really true. And another thing since then, as my way of giving back to the cancer community and those who are fighting their battle and out there suffering, as my way of giving back and doing a selfless good deed. For the last 16 or 17 months, I've been growing my hair out so I can donate it to Pantene, so that way they can take my hair and turn it into a wig for those who have lost their own hair from chemotherapy or radiation, whatever the case may be. And that's my way of giving back. If I can make someone happy and thankful and put a smile on their face to give something back to them that they hold precious, whether it be not so much the vanity in their own appearance, but just the self-esteem that they put stock in, then I know that I've done a really good thing.
Absolutely. Anytime you have something life altering possible, it kind of gives you a whole new outlook on life. Now, last and finally, I wanted to touch base on something that you wanted to touch base on before, but it's something that we both have in common, and that's being adopted. I was adopted at birth. I found my birth parents when I turned 18. I have contact with them. I, it's been a, not everybody has that same experience. Talk about your experience being adopted. What was life like?
All right, so I was given up for adoption at birth. I was not adopted until I was 6 months old, and I was put into foster care directly after I was born. I have a very, very interesting adoption story, and it's another layer of life that just makes me so colorful. So I come from the South, and I was born in Orlando, Florida. My birth father was originally from Virginia, and he grew up in Petersburg. And when he had reached retirement age, he and his wife had retired to Florida. My birth mother was originally from Birmingham, Alabama, and moved to Florida when she was 5, and has spent most of her life there until about, I'd